The Necromancer, Part 4. Heavy Rusted Armor. But can Dirty Down's magic rust in a bottle really help us accomplish that? Let's hook our brushes around that. Heavily rusted armor. There's a lot going on. Depending on the type of metal and steel or iron or bronze or whatever age that the armor or weaponry was made from during the time long past, how does it oxidize? How does it compare being left in the ground, out in the rain, through eons of time? There's, again, a lot to consider when we paint rust and using rust effects. Through this trial and error, I've discovered a lot of different unique ways of making this magical bottle of rust work in my favor. Though I did find a couple of things I could have just skipped altogether along the way. But we'll get more in depth as the video progresses. When I sat down to first fool around making extremely weathered armor, I took it upon myself to do some research, looking at oxidized metal, what it looks like left in the ground for so long. I see pictures and stories of like ancient swords and armor that archaeologists have dug up and found. I mean, there's a couple of tools I have in my own personal possession that got left out in the rain, and you can see the oxidation to the metal with rusting that happens to it. And I got to thinking that, well, with these skeletons being in the ground for so long, it should be relatively the same, heavily oxidized. But when I first encountered the Dirty Down's rust effect, it was purely magic in a bottle. It really does work. However, it doesn't work with just a straight black or gray surface. I found there had to be color. Lots of color, and I really did some more experimenting and found the more color you add, the more effect the rust implemented. So I started going through and I rebase coated my fig in a couple of places, just trying to experiment further. And I just decided to do a lot of stippling, adding as many layers of contrast, darks and lights and blues and bluish whites, just to further enhance the effect of it. And stippling is a good way to create many layers, just like a Monet painting. Have you ever seen any of his beautiful paintings? They're all stipples. They all are thousands and hundreds and thousands of little tiny dotted paints, colors that creates beautiful masterpieces. So I kind of took that in inspiration by using very small amounts of colors that I would usually use when painting, armor that we all kind of see and used to doing, but more dingy and layered and left in the ground in a way to where if I finish it and it goes right and I put down the rust effects, then it should come out the way I envisioned it, left in the ground for hundreds of years. And ultimately, I got the results I was looking for. But it took some experimentation, like I said. I kept deciding to go back and forth between a trash brush to stipple and a relatively fine-pointed brush to get more precise with it. And kind of going back and forth, I kept, being undecisive. And I
kept glazing over dark areas and re-stippling very light colors, and kind of had to go back to blues and then go back over whites, and until I was comfortable and happy with the outcome, because again, I wanted to make sure that I was getting enough of the effect to the rust to activate. And I went ahead and decided to go ahead and repaint the chest armor front and back and continue to see if this experiment would work. So going through doing the exact same colors and process, making sure I implemented enough blues and kind of toned down the white a little bit more to where it would show hopefully progress and what the activation of this chemical that's inside the Dirty Down, what it would do. And we'll see how this progresses as it continues on. I also realized while doing the stippling method using the colors that I was using, this actually might be some good use into a later video of armor and snow, or snow effects. I kind of jotted that down, and maybe that can be something later. Now for the moment of truth. Dirty Down's rust effect, magic in a bottle. So as I started stippling this on and slathering it, glooping it on, I really did see that there was nothing happening at all to the black's painted surfaces compared to the places where I've been stippling all that color, all that bluish white and gray, lighter colors. Nothing was happening. Not even a small bit of change. However, when I kept adding more and more layers to the areas where there was color, there was a lot more interest happening. But I still wasn't happy with the result at all. I mean, it looked okay, but it wasn't that heavy oxidization of metal that I was really looking for. So I went ahead and just slathered on, this first layer while I was kind of deciding where to go from here. And then it hit me. Why don't I try a few different things out? This is a rust effect, yes, but what would happen if I added some actual rust effect colors? For example, the Vallejo rust effects paint line. I typically use to, paint my rust effects in streak and grime. So I went ahead and painted over the first layer of the Dirty Down's rust effect with more stippling and more stippling layers, just adding more and more textures onto this. And once that was on there, I said, okay, well, let's go ahead and add another layer of Dirty Down rust effect and see what happens there. But I was a little bit more sparse on it. And once I did that, I was starting to finally get somewhere. Of course, all that color that I put, all that blues and whites, has basically been covered up by now, but I was actually getting some rust. But I wanted to go even further. So I grabbed some Martian earth and wanted to experiment with that. So I went ahead and put some of that down, and I started globbing, thick spots here and there, and see what kind of effect I can get from that. I was finished, and once it was all dried up, because I'm impatient and I did use a heat gun, I could see that the Martian earth did leave cracks and a bunch of areas where usually when you see in real life metal, the flakes that metal is, oxidizing and it's coming off. And that looked, to me, more realistic. So experimenting further without putting down any color, just using it by itself, I wanted to see if the rust effect just by itself on top of it, how it would react. And the results are ultimately surprising to me. Whereas putting down the first coat and then letting it sit there and dry, it turned very yellow, brown, the more oxidized, rough metals that we see in your typical rusted things. That really surprised me. That is what I was looking for. That is heavy rust. That is something that has been left in the ground, just like these ancient swords or armor that archaeologists have been finding. That is what I was looking for. But I wanted to push further, experiment further. What would happen if I went ahead and added some of the rust effect colors, and then on top of that, and then added another layer of the rust effect, and what would happen? I relatively got the same results. However, there was a lot of splotchy points where I was probably a little too heavy on layering it down, but overall it ended up with the same result. And this I was happy with. I was happy with what this was going. So I ultimately decided to just go back and forth and leaving the rust effect to the Martian Earth, and I thought that was perfect. I thought that was exactly the way it needed to go, and the end results is pretty spectacular in my opinion.
Welcome back, adventurers. Hey, thanks for watching to the very end. If you don't mind leaving a like down there if you liked the video, and if you're a miniature painting adventurer who wants to join the guild, then hit that subscribe button. As soon as you do, you can hit the notification bell to let you know when videos in the guild are coming out as soon as possible, so you can share with other miniature painting adventurers just like yourself. And if you have any questions or want to know how to paint something or see something painted or built, then leave those comments down there below for me. I'll see you guys back here at the guild. In the meantime, back to painting. I think I missed a spot right there. Shit.